Hello, welcome everyone to another Experience Matters show. If this is your first time, a special welcome to you. We go live every Friday at this time, so 10 a.m. IST, which is 12:30 p.m. SGT. Yeah, and this show streams live across YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're pretty much there everywhere. So just go ahead, add your reminders so you never miss an episode. I'm Shibani Philip, like you see at the bottom of your screen. I head the enterprise business for the APAC region. And today we have a very special guest. We have Sanya. Thank you for joining and taking the time, Sanya.
Oh, Shibani, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So Sanya is an organizational psychologist, right? And the president of Question Pro Workforce Solutions. So we're thrilled to have her on the show. How's it going?
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I love that you're doing this show. I'm a huge fan of sharing knowledge across the
Yeah.
world, across, departments. And so when you invited me to join, I thought, there's no place I'd rather be. So thank you for having me. You're right. I'm
Awesome.
an organizational psychologist, which has become quite interesting over the last couple of years, particularly. I think for organizations, it's been an important area, but now with COVID and everything happening, everyone, took a giant leap back and said, what do we do with our people and how do we help support everybody more effectively? And
Yeah.
so I feel like what I do got to be even more powerful, which makes me so happy because you know me now for a while and you know how
Yeah.
passionate I am about making people, helping them feel happy and fulfilled and all of those different
Yeah.
things and how firm of a believer and that that ties into organizational success and all of those kinds of things and
Yeah. Yeah.
today, as the world is getting smaller in many ways and for us at Question Pro we work from anywhere. I'm actually
Yeah.
dialing in from Buenos Aires, Argentina. So
Mm.
it's
Just
different.
the beautiful Argentina. How is it there though? What's the weather? What's the situation like?
Yeah, well, the weather is getting better. So for most of you, I'm guessing many of you don't know me. Maybe this is the first time you're hearing me. So I'm originally from Serbia, former Yugoslavia. I lived in the United States for a little bit over 20 years and now in Argentina for a little bit over 6. And I'm still getting used to the fact that we're going into summer now.
Summer,
Like for,
yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
still in June wearing like snowflake holiday socks because that's what it's called. And it was usually, during like New Year's time
Yeah.
and it's everything
Yeah.
upside down. So for us, we're, it's getting nicer, it's getting warmer, it's getting sunnier. And I think to me, as a human, as a psychologist, like it helps so much to have that sunlight, to have a little bit of the to finally be able to breathe. It's
Yeah.
luckily, knock on wood, I can't, I like, I'm so cautiously optimistic, but I hope that Argentina was hit pretty hard by COVID, but I hope a lot of that is behind us. I hope, because I've had these hopes
Yeah.
before and I've had so many fun travel plans and then it got crushed again. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I always try to remain optimistic on where the situation's going.
Mm.
So beautiful
Yeah.
Argentina
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, it's the same. So you hinted at it, at getting into summers here. It's pretty much. I'm from South India. It's pretty much always summer. So I'm done with the sun. I'm like, oh, I'm enough now. But yeah, the situation here, things are opening up. So fingers crossed, it doesn't
Mm.
become bad again. They're ramping up vaccinations. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is what it
Mm,
is.
hoping
Hopefully,
hoping
we
for
can
easier times.
travel. Yeah, hoping we can travel again soon. Haven't traveled in quite a while.
Yes,
You did
I
a
have
recent trip,
big
if I'm
hope.
not wrong, right?
I
You went home.
I did actually went to see my parents in Belgrade, and it was nice because it was summer there, and I'm so close. I'm an only child, and actually have a son that my parents
Mm,
just adore. But most of the time now, because we live so far away, they get to see through,
yeah,
video chats and different things. So I was able to
yeah,
take him and spend some nice time with them, and so we ended up
special.
spending a couple of months actually, which was just phenomenal. So hopefully we'll
Yeah,
be able to do
yeah,
that again soon.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Here's to hoping.
Yeah.
Do you want to? Shall we kick it off? Shall we kick off the show?
Yeah, let's do it. I know you and I can chat forever. There's so many like different
Yes.
things to talk about, but I'm sure that aside from our personal lives and our hopes for everything getting better, our your listeners have some particular things on their mind that they'd probably like to hear us chat about.
Yeah. So we do have a few people who've joined us, but in this, so like I said, we're live every week, right? So this episode, what we really wanted to focus on and talk about is employee experience, and that's your specialty, that's the background. But and especially right now, we touched upon it a little bit, right? With the current situation, it's really the need of the hour. You have to keep your employees happy. How do you go about doing that? Right. So that is
Yeah.
one of the main things. The other thing that I'd love to talk about is, while we're you have your CX programs, you have your employee experience programs, but how do you merge them, right? Very
Yeah.
often it's run by two separate departments that don't really talk to each other. They don't have anything to do with each other. So how do you leverage both these programs so that it's not running as siloed programs throughout the organization, right?
Yeah.
And the last one, and I'm sure you have tons of things that they can do, the things that tips and tricks to get this going. But just if it'll be great if you can share with them a few steps to get their program, to get this built out. So yeah, those are the
Yeah.
three main topics that I wanted to cover for today.
Oh, I love it. So and I promise you that I'll try to stay as focused and as concise as possible because these are some of the things that I'm the most passionate about in life. And so I'm sure
Yeah.
we could talk about this for like a week straight and not run out of things to say. But I think, your point from an employee experience, we've done a lot of research around that at Question Pro, and a lot of organizations have looked into it lately. And wow, the people have changed and what they want has
Yeah.
changed. And what they want to do on day-to-day basis, how tied they want to be their organization to the values, how appreciated they feel, how much of an impact they have. They say, if I'm going to dedicate so much of my life to work, I want to know that I'm making a difference. And then on the
Yeah.
other hand, they're also saying, but I don't want that to come at the cost of my personal life. I am a
Yeah.
mother, I'm a father, I'm a child, I'm like a friend, a significant other, and I want to show up to that as well. And for me, it's interesting, like even, from a personal standpoint and being a psychologist and being a mother to a 3-year-old, I see that in myself every day too, where, I get up, I sit down at the computer, I have meetings. I love what I do. I feel so
Mhm.
lucky for that. But then when the end of the day comes, sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel like I was in like what felt like 75 meetings, in 8 hours, which
Yeah.
it felt like, and it wasn't. That's not possible. But
I've
then I
seen
want
your
to.
calendar. It kind of is, though.
Maybe like 73. But then
Yeah.
I want to be there for my son. And I
Yeah.
don't want to be the tired person that sits down. I want to show up to him with the same energy and passion that I show up to work. And that's what
No.
we're
Yeah.
seeing in a lot of our research, right? Is people are saying all of that matters. And then they look to their employers and say, how can you help me? Because earlier in the year, we talked a lot about burnout at Question Pro, and we shared
Yeah.
some really good data around that. And one of the things, I had another one of my, friends join, and she's also PhD in organizational psychology, and we shared our own research. We shared research from Harvard, from McKinsey around how much that's an organizational challenge more than just an individual. Because sometimes we think, oh, mindfulness is important, yoga is important,
Yeah.
nutrition, which is all absolutely true. But the way the organization helps you organize your time, the pressure that it puts on you, the way it supports you, actually has significantly greater impact than if you're eating healthy, meditating, doing yoga, etc. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, to reel all of that back in, when it comes to employee experience today, it's so critical for organizations. Like in our, business unit, we call it empathy at scale. And
Mm.
to me, we at Question Pro are, a research organization. We are a survey organization. To me, that's something, when I started my education kind of many moons ago now, most of the research that we done, almost all of it was done through surveys and through connecting with
Yeah.
people and understanding, how do you feel? What do you
Mm.
need? How can we better support you? And so, in way for organizations, a lot of times when we do research, we're saying, we did this, we made this choice, was it okay? So it's looking
Yeah.
back, but there's also this huge opportunity to connect with people and say, what else do you need from us? Here are some things that
Yeah.
we're thinking about. So it's like, it's getting that advice, it's getting that input for our future actions, not just only understanding how our actions in the past, how effective they were. And one more thing I'll say about employee experience, and then we'll parallel it into customer experience, is that people will change. We saw this huge
Yeah.
change over the last, year and a half, 2 years, and that is not going to stop. Why? Because today our reality is changing from day to day. And somebody might say, you know what, I need to work from home. I really do. I need to be with my kids. And then those kids, a year later, get bigger, maybe noisier, maybe the situation changes, and the person might say, okay, maybe I can't be at home all the time. Maybe now I need to go to the office. And they have the right to change their mind. It's not like, speak now and forever hold your peace. We're going to evolve as people. And so, from the employee experience, and what we're seeing is that there are some unique needs. There are unique needs for working parents. There are unique needs for people who are living on their own. They're unique. Like, people are very different. And to continue to have that conversation. Now, one thing that I want to be very transparent about, because I'm an optimist. I see rainbows and unicorns often. However, I'm also a business leader, so
Mm.
I have to run profitable business, and so I understand the trade-offs. And so I don't want somebody to hear me say, "Oh, we need to transform the organization always based on what the people are asking us for." It's not possible. But if you understand what's most important to them, you can adjust for those needs. And then you can also understand things like, one of the things I'm getting asked a lot about is salary.
Yeah.
Like, for a lot of, people, salary, like, we want to be fulfilled, we want to do all these things, but in almost all research that we do, salary still comes up as number one thing that's important to people in a job. Why?
Yeah.
Because for the vast majority of us, we work to make money to support ourselves, to support our family. Like, it's our source of
Mm.
income for our livelihood. And and so in that sense, like, if an organization says, I know I cannot be in the top, I know I can't be in this bidding war, okay, that's okay. Not everybody
Yeah.
can, but what else is it that people want that's going to help you attract the people to your organization? And so that's where I think it really, based on the conversations you and I have been having around, like, the, EX and CX, that segues really nicely into understanding your organization as a whole, because your employee and their satisfaction and their engagement directly translates in how they communicate with the customer. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely. And if they show up and they feel like you care for them, the way they're going to communicate with that customer is going to be very different.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
to your go
I
ahead,
know.
go ahead.
No, I completely on board with everything that you're saying. Just earlier, just that one line of what you said. What asking your employees, what more do you need from us? I think you touched upon that a little bit more, but
Yeah.
it's so relevant, right? Because all you're asking is you're measuring their performance, so how they're performing at work. You're asking them things like, okay, we had all of these initiatives. Did you like it? Did you not like it? But actually giving them that voice to like you said, it can be salary most of the time, and if you can work on it, great. If you can increase the salary, great. But if you can't, there are other suggestions and things that they itself will volunteer, saying that this is
Yeah.
important for us, for me to perform better. These are things that I need. So a lot of things come just by giving them that voice. Yeah.
Yeah. And you actually make a really good point, because that's a lot of times the salary part is the difference between talent acquisition and retention.
Yeah.
Because it becomes a bigger deal in talent acquisition when someone's deciding, should I take the offer? When they come inside the organization, they've already accepted that salary offer. So
Mm-hmm.
now that, yes, of course, people are looking to, at promotions, a career advancement. Absolutely. But once they're inside, all those other things, and what's so interesting to me, two things. Two. One, is when we do culture research, how often the ways that executives in an organization, like top leadership, perceive the culture and what's needed by their employees or frontline workers is so different than what those employees are saying. And that's
Yeah.
where that research and those surveys are so critical, is to bridge that gap. Because a lot of times, an executive or a team of executives with the best intentions will have this idea, let's do this, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
invest in it, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work, but it doesn't work because they never asked, is this what you want? They
Exactly.
never got that input.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that a lot of times, like organizations that we work with get worried because they'll say, Sanya, but if we ask and we can't deliver on it, isn't that worse?
Mm.
No. So what is bad with employee surveys is if you ask and you never discuss it. But
Mm.
I have found that 99% of the time, I won't say 100 because there's always, I'm sure, some exception, the things that people want are actually relatively easy for the organization to do, and they don't cost very much because I think
Yeah.
people always worry if we do something, wow, it's going to come at this exorbitant cost and we can't. And most of the times it's not. Most of the times it's like
Mm.
a relatively small adjustment. And the fact that people feel listened to makes
Yeah.
such a huge difference just right
Huge
there.
difference. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and you and I have talked about, so like now when you look at CX and, we can start talking about measurement a little bit.
Yeah.
But for CX, the NPS is oftentimes like the be all and end all. Like how likely would you to recommend, this product and service and because of that, the employee net promoter score spun off some years ago. How likely are you to recommend this organization as an employer? Now, there are things that are directly related between CX and EX, like training and development. Like you and
Mhm.
I, were chatting about, well, what are the KPIs? What's expected out of a person? What's that, like rat race to get to a certain
Yeah.
rating or a certain number? But if you're not getting there, how do you get there? And what is that support that you're receiving? And
Yeah.
how are different training and development programs effective? How are different leaders effective? Like you start to, when you combine that data, you get so much more clarity around
Mm.
what are the points of improvement and then employee experience that we could touch on that can have really significant impact on that customer experience. Now, when we start to look at how do you operationalize that, like something else we chatted about is finding champions. So
Mhm.
anything in an organization, like unfortunately, um like you mentioned, these areas are oftentimes siloed, these metrics are oftentimes siloed, and so the first question is like, who becomes an owner of this? Now,
Yeah.
one thing that I've seen a lot of times when people ask me, like, oh, give examples, like, tell us what didn't work. So I'll say one thing that doesn't work. One thing that doesn't work is not having people who have full ownership of something. And
Yeah.
what that means is that, unfortunately, if somebody feels like they're not being measured on something, they're not going to make it a priority. And that's human nature
Mm.
because most of us have our own KPIs. Most of us, like, this will be likely something additional I'm taking on. Now, even if I'm a full believer that this is really important, I, as a business unit leader, might have, revenue numbers I have to put up or invoicing numbers that I have to put up. As an HR leader, I already have like turnover, retention numbers I need to look at, time to hire. Like, so you're giving me another project and another KPI. And so organizations need to make sure that this is not treated as a nice to have, but it's
Mm.
treated as a must have and that it's very clear. So in
Yeah.
psychology, there's this like principle that's like, it's true even when you write an email, that's called diffusion of responsibility. And what that
Mm.
means is if you give a group of people responsibility for something, but it's not clear who's doing what, there's a very
It's
high
not gonna get
likelihood
done.
nobody will do anything
Yeah.
because it'll
Yeah.
be like,
Yeah.
oh, the other
Yeah.
person's going to do something. And it's just,
Yeah.
the thing is, it's not bad people, it's human nature. There have been psychology
Mm.
studies done on this for decades, and it's just how we function. So, really easy fix, Shivani, Sanya, this is now your responsibility. This is how we're going to measure you. This is what we expect out of this. Or we expect you to come up with something and present to the board or present to the executives, but we're looking to you. And this is a key part of your responsibility now. So, that's one of the things. Um, and then it's also doing it cross functionally because if you make it
Mm.
just for the leader of CX, but not the leader of EX, or just the leader of EX, like the other person, again, more than likely will not take it as seriously because they don't see it as a part of their responsibility. It's like, oh, I'll help this person, but no, no,
Mm.
no. So the other thing is to have those task forces, to have
Mm.
a person dedicated from each group that can make a difference, and also to have somebody that's good with analytics. Like they don't have to be like brilliant data scientists, but people more often than not are scared about numbers a little bit. Like if I don't
Yeah.
know exactly how to collect it, if I don't know what it means, like people feel very exposed by it. It's the reality. And then there are people who are comfortable with the numbers. So having that person as a part of the team, I think is really critical because it'll take this like incredible knowledge from CX to say what it is that you need. Like, what are the
Yeah.
pain points in your business? And then you
Yeah.
work backwards for what can we get from employee experience, and the same thing for employee experience. Like, what are the pain point in your business, and what you're essentially looking for, that I feel like we're always looking for as humans, is the win-win. So how
Yeah.
can both group benefit, and how do you merge that? And I'll say one other thing, and I mentioned, NPS and ENPS, and like, brilliant, same scale, almost the same question. Like, you can correlate that, you can do regressions, like, you can really see the relationship of it. The one thing that I would recommend is to ask, what are we looking at and why?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
so often I'll see companies have these like really interesting questions, and I'll ask them like, what action are you going to take when you get the results? And they'll say, "Oh,
Exactly.
that's a really good question. I don't know." So when you're taking on a new project, I think there's this like there can be this excitement of like, "Oh, let's look at this and this and this," and then it becomes really complicated. And what do you look at? And you don't want to get, I mean, not even all the way to analysis paralysis, but like all the like you want to be passionate about it, and you want to be focused. And so
Yeah.
my other recommendation would be like, what are some key variables that you can start with to see how they impact each other? And then if you want, you can build off of that. But if you're going to create a super complex study, the first thing that, it's going to be a threat is like, how do we actually interpret all of this? What does this all mean? You can get really lost in the data. It's going to take a lot longer to set up. So just to have a few meaningful numbers from your business with those few key stakeholders, I think that that takes down the barrier of time to get started. Like for organizations, like, hey, we can start to do this in the next month
Yeah.
easily. It keeps the focus, and then it also like really lends itself easily to iterations, because you're
Mm.
always going to improve. And there might be
Yeah.
numbers that you're looking at and you're saying, no, I just need more context. And that's okay. The one, maybe I'll say this last and I'll stop rambling. Like, it will not be perfect the first time around. Nothing in life is.
Mm.
But the sooner you
Yeah.
try something and the sooner you can learn from it, the better you can get at it. And if this is the
Mhm.
first time that it's being done in your organization, like even just what you're bringing to the table is going to be so incredibly valuable that people are going to be really excited to hear that story. Like, what story does this data tell us? What can we do about it? And where do we go to next? So, anyways, I'll
Yeah.
pause. You can tell I love it.
No, it is. It's super interesting, right? And there's so many tidbits that you gave there that can actually be implemented. Another one that I wanted to add is, even though you're going to involve everyone in the action planning, right? You're going to involve the key stakeholders of the AX program, the CX program. I think it's also important to share this data with everyone. So when you have an employee, of course, not at an employee level because of the anonymous, but at an overall level, the stats, the metrics, how is it improving, the improvement areas that are coming from that, not just relying on that one stakeholder to make this PPT, which again is going to delay the data being shared with everyone by 3 weeks, but have the dashboards, have this data deprecated across everybody in the organization, everybody who's relevant, who should be seeing this data. Use the power of software, the technology, whichever technology that you're using, right? If you're using Question Pro, great. If you're, there are a lot of things that you can use, that making sure everyone has access to this data and they know what the trends are like, right? I
Yeah,
think that that's something that can be easily incorporated as well, without too much of an investment, without and of course, because everything's in real time, there's no a time cost there as well. So
yeah, I love that. And I completely agree with that. And I think I'm so glad you brought up that point, because both, like in this kind of work, it's both for employees to benefit and the organization to benefit. And
mm,
so when you're communicating this to the employees, it's so important to say, hey, like, thank you for your input. Like, first of
yeah,
all, they took the time, they showed vulnerability in many cases to say, this is what I really like, this is what I really need. And when you present that information to them, to say why it's about them, why
yeah,
it's about investing in them, improving their experience, and getting them to enjoy their job more, getting them to be even better at their job. So like sometimes people now, like, I think the buzzword is storytelling, which
mm,
I'm partly okay with, because I think it gives it the importance that it needs. But it's always when you think about what audience, like when you talk to the executives, you'll talk about the employee experience and you'll talk about the success of the business. when you're talking with employees, you want to talk about the success of the business, but you want to focus on how you're investing in them to
Yeah.
contribute to that success of the business and to their own individual success, because to the person that means so much. Like, it helps them understand why they're such a critical part of that whole, but it also helps them understand, like, how will I benefit from this as a human. And a lot of times I tell people, we'd love to have our employees like their entire lives, right? Like, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I want you to stay with me. We know that's not true. We look at the
Yeah.
numbers. People don't stay with the same organization. So in many ways, it's, an organization investing in them to be better at their job at their current organization, but it's also investing in them as a human, because all of
Mm.
these things that they learn, they'll take wherever they go. And so I think that
Yeah.
messaging can be so incredibly powerful. And imagine having that conversation with somebody and then going and getting on the phone with a customer, your mindset is just completely different. You're saying, wow, like, this is really great what the organization is doing, not only for the well-being of our business, but for the well-being of me as an individual. So great
Yeah.
point. I love
And yeah.
it.
Yeah, and also just one time, and I see very often overlooked, right? Because your employees are dealing with your customers on a daily basis, especially your frontline employees. They understand what your customers are going through, maybe even better than your customers are, right? So they have, most of the time, they have such valid input, such valid recommendations and things that you can improve very quickly, right? Without too much of an investment. It's imperative to give them that platform, not only to share what their experience is like, but also to give their two bits in terms of what do they need to do to improve customer experience, because they know best. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I so agree with that.
So where do you think they should start, Sanya? How to do, for somebody, let's say they're running a CX program, they're running, surveys across different touch points. They do have an employee experience program, right? They have a
Yeah.
culture survey. They have things like going. How do they start, tying this together? How did they, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there are a few different ways. One recommendation I would make. So again, because I think a lot of times, like, it's different stakeholders and organizations, you'll have different systems. That's okay. Ideally, if an organization at some point can move towards, like, data collection, like whether it's, surveys through one system, storing the information in the same system. I've worked with data for a really long time, and I know it's not like an easy overnight task. But the sooner they start thinking about, this is our organizational data versus our departmental data, um, the more easily they'll be able to do analysis in the future, the more easily they'll be able to look at that impact. So I would say it's never too early to start with that, like, just kind of like, as building a foundation as that maintenance. I would say getting those people in the different departments that believe in this. I think
Mm.
getting them appointed is like a key next step. And I do think a lot of people would be interested in something like that. I don't think that would be like, oh, it's going to be a punishment for somebody, or it's going to be yet another thing, because it is going to have an impact for the business overall. And then
Yeah.
understanding, again, why are we doing this? So, okay, like,
Mm.
everyone's talking about CX and EX, and we know happier employees make for better businesses, da, da, da. But yes, now in your particular business, again, what are you looking to solve for? And how can you
Mm.
help each other? And I would come with those, like, really clear statements. Like, in my business, we're looking to solve this. Like, if you have KPIs, if you have data that you're using, even better. Like, okay, so this is, our
Mm.
net promoter score is this. We're looking to, do this. Our, like, our reoccurring customer score is this. We're looking to do this. And the same thing on the
Yeah.
employee side. And so, because why, as these groups are merging for greater good, they still have their own KPIs they're looking to impact. And the reason why this merge would happen is because we believe that they're going to impact each other, that these statistics
Mm.
don't exist in silos. The buy-in is going to be even greater the faster you start to see even the numbers. You always, like, I have one, two, three, four, five, like, seven dashboards I log into every morning, and I refresh, like, my KPIs from, like,
Yeah.
website traffic to opportunities to, like, closing, like, all of that. So if you bring those KPIs and say, this is, I'm looking at employee engagement, or I'm looking at satisfaction, or I'm looking at absenteeism, I'm look like, there's so many, but usually there are maybe like 1 to 3 numbers that are keeping people up at night. Up at night, meaning like we're always striving to do better. So again,
Mm.
having building your data foundation, getting your team in order, understanding what your individual KPIs are, and then understanding again, like it doesn't matter where you are today in that journey, you can always look at that. Like, even if you literally like pull numbers out of a system and just put them in an Excel, you can start to do analysis because there are
Yeah.
so many fancy analytics tools that pull different data together. It takes time, they can be expensive. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is there are many reasons why companies might say, like, I'm not ready for this today. Like, I want to
Mm.
do this, but it's just too much today. My my words to them would be that you can't afford to wait because this is the
Yeah.
trend where organizations are going is combining this data. So even if you start small, even if you start very basic, what's going to happen a lot of times is when you start to look at the data in combination, you get really excited about the opportunities. So all some of that heavy lifting that might have seemed very daunting, all of a sudden you have much different passion and much different energy to want to do it.
Mm. Mm.
And
Mm.
maybe when we're just like, "Ah, data cleansing," like having one
Yeah.
platform, now we have to get purchasing and, like, we have to do all this stuff and get them involved in it, like, "Oh, no, no, we want to," because wow, like,
Yeah.
we just combine these, like, few numbers and look at the power of it, what if we could do more? So, that from very practical steps, I guess those would just be a few, and again, just iterating. Like, I've never been in a conversation with a client, I've never been in a job myself where when I looked at numbers and when I looked at insights, like this is a double negative. Every time that I've been in a job, it's always giving me more ideas. It's always giving me more questions. And it's always challenged me and organizations that I work with to look at things differently, and to keep pushing the boundaries and keep wanting to see more, keep building more ideas. So I would say that that's definitely like it's not like one of those one-time shots. And I think that's
Yeah.
brilliant because we're going to
Yeah.
continue to learn more. We're going to continue to get better, each organization individually. But then again, as we're seeing that trend happening, what my hope is that more and more people will come out and talk with you and talk with others around specifically what's working in their organizations, what they tried that didn't. Like some of my biggest like things to share that I mentioned a couple times is like share with people what didn't work, like spare them the pain
Yeah.
of trying
Mm.
something
Mm.
and having to do a different iteration. But no matter how many of those learnings you have, like you're gonna try things that are not gonna work, and that's okay because every time you
Yeah.
learn something from it. But the end goal is so important that just to start to experiment now again with a small group, with a small data set, but just to get started is like would be my like
Yeah.
wholehearted advice for anyone listening to
Yeah.
us or anyone who joined us today.
Yeah, yeah. And so very often, you have seen a leadership who understands the power of it, right? Who's driving it in the whole organization. There can be times when, they just don't think it's important enough. You can still start small, right? You can prove the success stories, take it to them and drive that culture. It need not only be top down. You can start small, incorporate it. Like you said, you'll always have learning. So it's something that even if you're just part of one CX team, that's enough to start, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, you just need your data and then you can learn from there.
Yeah, and I would say even for this, like I read, God, I think it was last year, a book called "Leading Without Authority" by Keith Ferrazzi, and he was actually talking about people in different departments who might not necessarily have the titles of influence or they're making really big differences in their organizations. And I love that book. And I would say for something like this, like I completely agree with you. It does not need to be top down. I would almost argue, don't let it like as a business unit
Mm.
leader, as an executive in your own organization, as a manager, it doesn't matter. Take that initiative because I can't think
Yeah.
of a single time that a business like invested in using data in decision making and it was a really bad idea. Like, right? Like it doesn't make sense. You always want to quantify and understand what's happening
Yeah.
and to bring that to your leadership and to bring those insights as something that was self initiated, I think it can be even more powerful than if it was a mandate from top down, where somebody said, we need to start looking at this kind of data. If you say, listen, we've realized that if we join these different teams and we look at this data, we can make it even more significant difference. to me, for the people that do that, it puts them in this incredible light as somebody that takes initiative, that knows what makes an impact on the organization. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that because to me, again, for anybody that's a part of our conversation now, I wouldn't wait for it to be a mandate. Not at all.
Yeah, 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 yeah. All right. So I think I'm hoping everyone who's joined the call, you've been able to, we're able to communicate at least how important it is and give you some ideas in terms of where to start. We, of course, if Sanya is willing, we'll obviously have her back on the show. She has a lot of, stories and knowledge to share. So she's definitely going to be back, and we're going to have more sessions like this. Like I said, we're here every Friday. Subscribe to the channel. And the next time Sanya is on, you're not going to miss it. So, um, yeah, any closing points, thoughts, Sanya?
No, thank you, Shabani, for this space. Thank you for bringing up this really important topic. It was such a pleasure to be here with you. For anyone listening, you'll see my name, and I'm on LinkedIn mostly out of all social media. So please feel free to connect. I love learning more about what organizations are doing, how we can help. So thank you for everyone that joined. Thank you, Shabani, for having me. It was such a pleasure to be a part
Yeah,
of your show.
yeah, and I love your work at life. You have a show that's out every week as well, right?
Yes, yes. We
Yeah,
focus
it's
on culture, we
amazing.
focus on employee experience, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so all of you guys go check out Work at Life as well. It's live every Tuesday, right, Sanya?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Thank you all for joining. See you
Thank
soon.
you, Shivani.